I did want to spend some time talking about experimentation, but that's that could be a whole other kind of conversation in itself. So I guess one of the questions though that a founder actually wanted me to ask in advance though is what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see marketplaces make around experimentation?
Yeah, let me sort of yeah, you're right. It could be a big topic and it's a fun one. I just want to tell everyone we just I think literally today had a Harvard Business Review article that came out. So it's myself, Martin Tingley, Yav Bojanov, David Holtz, and Sven Schmidt. That's basically talking about sort of scaling experimentation. So how do you get from, starting up experimentation using like third-party tools and so on, up to the next phase of experimentation where you're actually kind of operating at high velocity and chaining experiments together in an intelligent way. So I think it's a good read to address some of the issues that this question brings up. I think what's complementary to the article is, what are mistakes when you're starting out with experimentation? And I think there's two things I want to bring up. One of them is you can, I think, paralyze yourself. I think it took me a long time to understand this, honestly, because when I started out in the tech industry, I thought, of course you want to be data driven. Isn't that obvious, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to be data driven? But there's a funny thing about experimentation, which is it demands a level of rigor in the volume of data you're able to obtain and the precision with which you're able to estimate effects that actually can preclude you from thinking of other big things for which collecting that kind of data wouldn't be possible. For example, you're a new company. Maybe what you're doing is you're charging users per transaction. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, should we move to a menu? I mentioned Urban Sitter earlier, and this is one of the interesting things they did is they moved from a per transaction credit card fee billing model to something where they opened up a subscription possibility. I'm putting aside all the desiderata that go into making that choice. One of the things I want to point out to you is you cannot A/B test that when you're a new business. That is not something you're going to be experimenting with easily. So if you sit there and you say to yourself, I will only be data driven in the sense that I will only do things for which I can run an experiment and validate it's a good idea, you would never even try it. And, I think there's this funny sense in which, while it pains me to say it, it's true that if you rely on experimentation for everything, especially as a young business without that level of high velocity and parallelism of experimentation that larger businesses can have access to, what you'll end up doing is just looking under lampposts that are already lit, and you may not end up investigating the bigger high risk ideas. Now, I want to say that, and this is something the article does talk about, that there's a lot of evidence that's emerged in the academic literature about this sort of role of high risk ideas in experimentation. I don't know if most people know this, but success rates at successful companies with experimentation are very low. Experiments can be 10%, right? And Ron Kohavi, for example, has written about this quite a bit. So 10%. So what does that mean? Like one option is you could say to yourself, oh, that's terrible. I should be chasing higher success rates. If our experimentation program is such that we're only succeeding 1 out of 10 times, my data scientists are doing something wrong. I should be succeeding 9 out of 10 times. The problem is if you push them to succeed 9 out of 10 times, they're going to do it by being very incremental. And the big ideas that can really move the needle won't get tested because they're too high risk. The goal actually is to test higher risk ideas and to abandon those that don't look good quickly and to test many of them so that you figure out kind of what these big winners could be, right? And some of that is actually A/B testing in the narrow sense, but some of experimentation is actually what we sort of humans think of colloquially as experimentation, right? Like I'm going to try out a new fitness routine this weekend. I'm not running a randomized trial. I'm just going to go, for a 6 mile run instead of a 3 mile run, right? So I think it's important to distinguish between being quantified and data driven that way. So what I try to encourage people to do is try to attach numbers to your beliefs of why you think something might be a good idea. And also use that to ask yourself, what evidence do you need to see from this new thing that you're trying out? Maybe not without a like strictly defined experiment. What do you need to see to convince yourself that, hey, maybe there's a there, right? And when you put it that way, a lot of what founders do is experimentation. It's not A/B testing as run by an Optimizely like platform, but it's definitely experimentation. And I think you want to view all of that as a spectrum. And especially when you're young, you do not want to paralyze yourself by like falling into the trap of only doing things where A/B tests can tell you that they were a good idea. So I think, there's like the kind of points I want to emphasize there is sort of one, the role of testing high risk ideas, and two, the role of being quantified. This idea of being sort of quantified rather than quantified as a superset of being data driven, in my view.